All right, it's great to see all of you. We left off on Tuesday with an extraordinarily deep and heavy discussion of irony, what it is, why it is necessary, and what it reveals. So I want to say just 4 points to conclude that discussion, and then we're going to finish the dialogue. Then we can turn to what the dialogue is actually about. We can actually turn to the discussion between Euthyphro and Socrates about what piety is. All right. So the kind of 4 takeaways about the moment of irony that we find within 5 minutes of the discussion between Euthyphro and Socrates. There are kind of 4 big takeaways to think about. One, Euthyphro did not want philosophy. Euthyphro rejected Socrates' offer, the philosophical offer, to reflect about what Euthyphro claims to know about piety, and whether or not what Euthyphro knows about piety is good and is going to be useful. In his arrogance, in his narcissism, in his vanity, and in his self-certainty, Euthyphro rejected Socrates' offer. And we could even go one step further and say, in a kind of heartbreaking way, not only did he reject the offer, in some ways you could even argue he didn't even hear it. He was oblivious to what Socrates was even trying to do, which is extraordinary because he's in a conversation with Socrates. He should be listening. He should be attentive. He should be present to the enormity of the issues at hand and to the sort of importance of the conversation at hand. But he's not. He's oblivious. He's wrapped up in his own head. So the first thing to keep in mind here is, and this is extraordinary, because if Euthyphro rejects Socrates' offer, one, because he doesn't think he needs it, or two, because he doesn't hear it, what this means in the big picture is that Euthyphro can't be taught. Euthyphro can't be educated. If people can't be taught, if they can't be educated, if they can't be taught philosophy, or if they can't become philosophical, then it's not possible for us to think our way out of our problems. It's not possible for us to transcend our problems. If Euthyphro rejects the offer or doesn't hear the offer because he believes, for whatever reason, in his narcissism and his hubris, that he already knows what he needs to know to proceed correctly, if he rejects, doesn't hear because he already knows, then he can't be taught. Right? And this is a kind of mind-blowing moment. In my famous Dungy melodrama on Thursday, I said this is one of the most important moments in the human life and in Western civilization, right? Because if Euthyphro, by the time we're 20 or 28, and we believe we already know what we need to know to do what we need to do, especially the important things, correctly, and if we don't fucking hear people, or we don't understand people's gesture, especially the philosophical gesture, to help us, then we can't be taught. And if people become so beholden to their opinions, so obsessed with their opinions, so certain in their opinions by their mid-20s, it means that in some ways people can't be taught. It's staggering, it's terrifying. Right? And Socrates, because Euthyphro ignored it, because Euthyphro didn't hear it, because Euthyphro believed he already knows what he needs to know to undertake the most serious and consequential decisions and events in a human fucking life, he can't be educated. He can't be penetrated. If Euthyphro can't be educated, then the crisis can't be fixed. If the crisis can't be fixed, the crisis continues. And the crisis becomes so immense in Euthyphro's life, in Euthyphro's family's life, and by extension, the life of the city. The crisis becomes so critical, it reaches a critical mass and it can't be fixed at all. And so this is an extraordinary moment. It's profound. So that's the first thing to think about. Euthyphro rejects or doesn't hear Socrates' offer. And that means, what does it reveal? I asked on the midterm, what does that reveal? Why is this profound? Because if he rejects it because he doesn't think he needs it, or if he doesn't even hear it because he's so caught up in his own mind, he's not even listening. He's talking to Socrates, but he's not even listening. He's not present. He's somewhere else in his vanity. Then it means he can't be educated. If people can't be educated, philosophy dies. If philosophy dies, the promise and the hope that we can think our way out of our crises, personal, moral, religious, familial, and political, that hope dies. In fact, it did. It died on the second page of the Euthyphro. It died in the first 5 minutes of the conversation. And in 10 days after Socrates' trial, it's going to really die. They're going to actually fucking kill Socrates. So this is a heavy moment in human life. Second takeaway. So Socrates is ironic with him. Oh, wondrous Euthyphro, what if I become your student, and what if you teach me everything you know? So Socrates is ironic with him. And irony is the saying of one thing and the meaning of something else. So technically it's kind of a lie, and it's a kind of a manipulation. And this is shattering. This is a fucking shattering moment on many levels. One, because who's doing the lying? It's Socrates. Well, who the hell is Socrates? Socrates is monumental because he's the father of philosophy. He's the man we point to as being the person who is responsible for the discovery of philosophy, for the discovery of the idea that there's an objective truth out there and that human beings are rational. And if we activate our reason, right, and we guide that reason by thoughtful and penetrating and unflinching questions, maybe, just maybe, if we're heroic and intellectual enough, we can acquire a little information about that stuff. So this is Socrates. This is a man who spent 30, 40 years of his life dedicated to the pursuit and the acquisition of true knowledge about the most important concepts like justice and courage and civility, and spent 40 years of his life searching for objective knowledge about human nature, what it means to be a human being and how human beings live well. And then ultimately how human beings live well individually, how they become self-governing, and how they live together well in a city. That's called justice. And there's a direct relationship in the big scheme, between being self-governing and justice. Only people who are self-governing individually can be just in the city, as we will see. So this is a shattering moment because Socrates is the first to discover the truth. He dedicated his entire life to searching for it and applying it to himself and begging other people to search for it and apply it to themselves. And yet, here at the end of his life, what is he doing? He's lying, right? It's shattering, it's mind-blowing. The man most obsessed with pursuing and acquiring knowledge of the truth is lying. He's forced to lie. That's this, and by the way, this is another one of those heart of darkness moments. Why is the father of philosophy, the way of living, a view of the way of living, the philosophical way, which is obsessed and committed with the truth? Why is he lying? Why is he forced to lie? Shattering. So the second takeaway, irony, the saying of one thing with the intention of something else for the benefit to whom one is being ironical, because Socrates is lying and manipulating Euthyphro for whose benefit? Euthyphro's. So the second takeaway is that the irony was forced upon Socrates. The irony was forced upon Socrates by Euthyphro. right? And we know that the irony was forced on Socrates because 5 minutes earlier in the conversation, what does Socrates try to do? He tries to give Euthyphro philosophy. Hey, are you sure you know? Boy, this is a pretty complicated thing. Most people wouldn't know how to proceed. And both times, Euthyphro, thank you next. Thank you next. The Ariana Grandism. So the second takeaway about this moment is that the necessity of irony, the saying of one thing with the intention of another for the benefit of somebody else, is a kind of noble lie. It is forced upon Socrates. Socrates doesn't willingly choose to be ironical with Euthyphro. The irony emerges out of a response to the fact that Euthyphro, in his arrogance and his narcissism, can't be taught. Third takeaway, equally as devastating. All four of these are heart of darkness moments. The third takeaway, I would say almost in a kind of if you can say this is the most important part of it, I don't know if you can, but if you could, maybe this might be right. The third takeaway is Euthyphro didn't see the irony. Euthyphro didn't see it. Socrates says, "Wondrous Euthyphro, I can't believe how lucky I am." Can you believe this? Someone named Miletus has accused me of being impious. And here I am, I'm on my way to the court and I meet you, and you're an expert in piety. Oh, imagine, think of the odds. What wondrous Euthyphro, what if I become your student? What if you teach me everything you know? And then when the indictment comes, Socrates, will say, well, I've become a student of the great Euthyphro. And I've learned now, so you don't indict me. If you recognize Euthyphro as being wise and in piety, and you recognize that I, Socrates, have become his student, then I've learned. So drop your indictment. It's a time of flattery. It's a kind of manipulation of Euthyphro's vanity. It's a kind of a manipulation of Euthyphro's ego. It's a kind of exaggerated flattery. And the extraordinary thing is Euthyphro doesn't see it. He doesn't see it. In fact, not only does he not see it, he's flattered by it. He puts his arm around Socrates, he gives him one of those, and he says, "Don't worry, old man. I'm going to teach you everything I know." And he says on the top of page 46, he says, "Yes, by Zeus, Socrates, if Miletus should then attempt to indict me or indict you, I would discover, as I suppose, where he, Miletus, is rotten. And our speech in the law court would turn out to be much more about him than about me." So not only does Euthyphro not see the irony, he falls for the flattery. His ego makes him vulnerable to Socrates' manipulation. He falls for the flattery. He says, "Yes, I'm gonna teach you. I'm gonna tell you what you know, and we're gonna defeat Miletus." And as I said on Tuesday, if you ever take anything from me, which you probably won't, this is an extraordinary waste of time, I think, but this is it. Don't let your narcissism, don't let your vanity, don't let your arrogance blind you to the presence of irony. Now, this is really damn important. This is really damn important, because it's not just that you need to be on guard about whether your arrogance, your narcissism, your certainty that you know what you need to know about the most important things to do things correctly. It's not just that you need to be on guard for that because it makes you vulnerable to irony. Why this is really important is because there are no more Socrateses in the world. Socrates is ironical with Euthyphro because Socrates generally has Euthyphro's best interest at heart. But there are no more Socrateses. Most people who are going to deploy something like irony, which, by the way, it is an irony because nowadays the people who are going to deploy it don't give a damn about you, don't give a fuck about you, don't give a shit about your well-being. They're going to lie to you and they're going to manipulate your flattery because they want something from you. And if your narcissism and your arrogance makes you vulnerable to people's flattery, if you don't see the lie, if you don't see the manipulation, you become vulnerable to their manipulation. And it happens every day in this culture. Capitalism has made an art of it, an art of the lie and the manipulation to extract something from you, to extract your wealth, to extract your loyalty, to extract your devotion. Every day. Be on guard. When someone comes to you and says, oh, well, hey, you are so smart and you're so talented. You deserve, boy, wouldn't you like to have this? Or wouldn't you look good in this? Or boy, let me show you this. Anytime somebody flatters you, and I want you to raise your hand and I want you to promise. Anytime someone comes to you and says, wondrous Euthyphro, wise, talented, beautiful, influencer, YouTube fucking influencer, Euthyphro. Every time someone comes to you and flatters you, wondrous Euthyphro, I want you to say to you, I want you to promise me now, and I want you to say to yourself every time, why is this person flattering me? And am I worthy of the flattery? Socrates says, Euthyphro, wondrous Euthyphro. And Euthyphro says, yeah, you're fucking right. I've got drip. Right? I am wondrous. That's right. I'm fucking Nick Dungy. I'm say your name. I am wondrous. I know it. Yeah, I know it. I know these things. Next time someone flatters you, two things. One, why are they flattering me? And two, most importantly, am I worthy of the flattery? Now, if you're philosophical in your soul, if you're philosophical in your nature, you're probably going to say, probably not. There's more I could learn. I'm probably not as wondrous as I think I am. Don't believe your own bullshit. Don't believe the bullshit other people tell you. Always, is that an accurate reflection of me? Wondrous. If Euthyphro had said, oh, why is Socrates flattering me? And boy, am I as wondrous as Socrates says? Okay. Don't be Euthyphro. Don't let your narcissism and your vanity and your self-certainty make you vulnerable to, and by the way, it's not even irony anymore because Socrates is dead and there are no more Socrateses. Now it's just lies and manipulation designed to extract things from you. And four, equally as important, irony the noble lie is at best only a strategy to keep the conversation going to buy time. This is extremely important. Irony and or the noble lie is at best, the best it can be is a tool. First of all, it's a tool. And the most it can do is to buy a little time. The irony is a tool. The noble lie is a tool. And the best it can do is buy a little time. Irony can never solve the crisis. At best, irony is a strategy that keeps the conversation going, right? It just keeps the conversation going long enough in the hopes that the person to whom you're being ironic, as the conversation unfolds and deepens, right? Because 10 minutes ago, the conversation was over, right? Euthyphro said twice to Socrates, thank you next, thank you next. So the fucking conversation's done, right? That was one of the crises. Irony keeps the conversation going, right? It's a strategy to keep the conversation going. But at best, it's only a strategy. It's not a solution. Irony can never be a solution to the crisis. Irony can only keep the conversation going long enough in the hopes that we find a solution or we mitigate its negative consequences. So irony is a tool. The noble lie is a tool. And at best, it's a strategy. A strategy for what? To keep the conversation going. Why? In the hopes that in the extended conversation, the person who needed the irony, who originally didn't think he or she needed to know anything or learn anything, may, through the unfolding conversation, come to that most philosophical moments of humility and realize, oh, well, maybe I didn't know. Who's please mute yourself. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we good? Can we move on now? All right. So, and by the way, Genesis, that was for you. We just answered on the midterm the irony question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, buy me a Porsche.
Give me a few years on this.
Hey, real quick joke. I have been saying to my students since 1999, one of you is the next superstar, one of you is the next influencer, one of you is the next great coder, one of you is the next great novelist or movie maker. And I've been saying this for 23 years. And when that day comes, buy me a Porsche. I'm still driving a red Mazda 3. Okay. All right.
We're all in debt, so.
Yeah. I just read an article, literally, before this class started, that 90% of Americans die with over $60,000 in debt, student loans, mortgages, credit cards. So we are a feudal age, make no mistake. All right. You ready to move on? Let's finish the Euthyphro. Okay. So the irony works, right? The irony works. Euthyphro agrees to become Socrates' teacher. This part's funny, right? Right? Euthyphro agrees to become Socrates' teacher and to teach Socrates everything he knows about piety. And of course, as you can imagine, Socrates is a very eager student. He's very excited to get started, right? This is Socrates. So literally on page 46, on line 5D, right in the middle of the page, 46, Socrates says, and I read this passage for two reasons. One, to read it, and two, to point to something very important. So Socrates looks at Euthyphro, and Socrates is very eager to learn. And Socrates says, okay, Euthyphro, so tell me now, Euthyphro, what you just now strongly affirmed that you know. What sort of things do you say the pious and the impious are concerning murder and concerning other things? And Socrates says, or isn't the pious itself the same as itself in every action? And again, isn't the impious opposite to everything pious? While it itself is similar to itself and has one certain idea. Okay, this is a little clumsy. The phrasing of it is a little clumsy, but this is one of them, again, another one of these most important moments in Western civilization. This is the beginning of metaphysics. When I said at the beginning of the class, what feels like 100 years ago, that Socrates and Plato are monumental, if they are, Nietzsche's going to say they're not, but if Socrates and Plato are monumental, it is for this reason. Socrates and Plato are the first to assert that an objective truth exists, and that this truth we can conceive of and hopefully acquire knowledge of this truth about essential concepts. An objective truth about human nature exists, and that we can hopefully acquire knowledge about it, and an objective truth about the natural world exists, what we now call science. Okay, so Socrates and Plato are monumental because they were first to introduce the idea of objective truth as we know it in Western civilization. This is the origin of metaphysics. And here on the 4th page of the Euthyphro, that's what Socrates is saying. Now, Socrates says to Euthyphro, okay, you, Euthyphro, you claim to be pious. So I want you to tell me, right, what sort of things do you say the pious and the impious are? Or isn't the pious itself the same as itself in every action? And again, isn't the impious opposite to everything pious, while it itself is similar to itself and has one certain idea, right? And the translators left the word idea italicized. It's eidos in the Greek, and it literally means idea. The Greek word eidos means idea, and it means idea in the mind. Like literally the idea in the mind and the idea that's out there, the objectively true idea of justice or the objectively true idea of human nature. That's what he means by the idea. Plato believed whatever the truth was, Plato believed the truth was ideas. They were ideas. There was a true idea of justice. There was a true idea of a circle. There was a true idea of human nature. Right? So objectivity for Plato consisted of ideas, pure ideas. Now, as we've said, when we had that lecture about metaphysics, for all forms of metaphysical systems of thought, for Platonic metaphysics, for an idea, whatever it is about, say, let's take for justice, for example, for an idea about justice to be true, according to this system of philosophy, it has to possess 3 characteristics, right? Yes, right? It has to exist when? All the time. It has to exist where? Everywhere. And it has to apply to whom? Everyone, right? And those are the 3 characteristics that must be necessary for something to be true, right? Like science, right? In a crude way, right? And I mean this in a very overly simplified way, but in a crude way, right? That's how science thinks of facts. And again, I'm being super general here, so don't at me on this, right? Because then we got to have a discussion about Wittgenstein and the whole debate about conventional or metaphysical fucking science, and then that gets into deep philosophy of mind, and then I got to start drinking. Okay, so this is a very simple analysis to be sure, but it helps you see it. If something is a fact, if we talk about facts now, right? The speed of light is a fact. We know it's not, but just assume that we did believe that. The speed of light is a fact. It's a scientific fact. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, it's always been the same, right? Since the Big Bang, the speed of light has been the speed of light. It's always been the same, right? It applies. Where does the formula for the speed apply? It applies where? Everywhere. And it affects or falls upon everybody the same, right? So that when we talk about facts, that's what we mean in a simple way. So here's the beginning of metaphysics. Socrates is asking Euthyphro, which by the way is quite an ambush. There's no way Euthyphro knows what he's talking about, which is fascinating, right? But Socrates is asking Euthyphro for what we would now call the philosophical idea of piety. And that's what he means. Isn't the pious, whatever the pious is, well, this is going to be a discussion about acquiring knowledge about the truth of piety, right? In Socrates' eye, right? This is going to be a discussion about how we pursue and acquire knowledge about the truth of what? Piety. Out there, there's a true idea of piety, right? And whatever that true idea of piety is, we don't know, but whatever it is, it's got to apply when? All the time. It's got to apply where? Everywhere. And it's got to apply equally to who? Everyone, right? And that's what he means in this kind of clumsy language, right? Isn't the whatever the pious is, he says, isn't the pious itself the same as itself? So it doesn't matter where you go. You can go to India, or you can go to Beijing, or you can go to Los Angeles, or you can go to Prague. And if there's an objectively true definition of pious, it's the same everywhere. It's the same all the time, and it applies in the same way to everyone. That's what he means. Welcome to metaphysics. There is Platonic philosophy right there. Is whatever the pious is, isn't the pious itself the same as itself in every action? Okay, right? And equally, whatever the impious is, right? Because there's got to be a perfect idea, a pure idea, an objective idea of impiety too out there, right? There's an objective, pure form or idea for piety. There's an objective, pure idea for justice, right? And likewise, same with everything else. It's a very crowded cosmos out there, right? So, and that's what he says. Isn't the impious, whatever the impious is, isn't the impious opposite to everything pious? While the impious, is similar to itself. Okay, there's Platonic metaphysics right there. Okay? That's why I read you that passage so you see it. And not only that you see it, but you know what Socrates is asking. Okay. And by the way, it's really unfair that Socrates asked Euthyphro this, right? Because obviously Euthyphro has no idea of what metaphysics is, right? All right. Okay, so you ready to go? Let's talk about the debate about piety. So now we finally, so welcome to the beauty and the hell, you could say. Welcome to the beauty and the hell, from a certain point of view, of the Platonic dialogue. We're just now getting to what the dialogue is ostensibly about, right? Right? And remember, there's always an esoteric message and there's always an exoteric message, right? The exoteric message is the message or the meaning that's on the outside, that's easy to see, that's readily available. And in the Euthyphro, the exoteric message is this discussion about piety, right? In fact, it's even in the title of the dialogue. If you go and it says Plato's Euthyphro, if you go to page 41, it says Plato's Euthyphro, and in little brackets it says or on the pious. So the exoteric meaning or substance or message of the Euthyphro is a discussion about what piety is. But as we've taken 2 lectures already, the really profound stuff in the Euthyphro, the esoteric meaning, has already what? It's already taken place. It's already taken place. And the esoteric message is, don't be Euthyphro. Become woke. When someone comes to offer you philosophy, offer you guidance, offer you the opportunity, even for a moment, to perhaps reflect on whether or not you know what you need to know to proceed correctly. Be humble enough, be woke enough, be awake enough to see it and to hear it and to be in the presence of your moment in the most profound and important and potentially consequential moments of decision or action. All right. So now we can finally talk about what the dialogue's about. All right. So Socrates is eager to learn. Euthyphro has become his teacher. So Socrates says, all right, what the hell is piety? Tell me what piety is, Socrates. Right? Tell me what piety is, Euthyphro. Right? And Euthyphro will ultimately give 3 definitions. And they're on the outline for you. And we're going to walk through them. We're going to read them and walk through them, okay? So ultimately, Socrates is going to push Euthyphro for Euthyphro to try to give him, Socrates, the meaning of piety, right? And Socrates is very insistent. And the first definition, or I should say response or answer, right? I would say answer is a better term. The first answer that Euthyphro gives to Socrates, right, about what piety is piety is imitating the gods. That's the first answer that Euthyphro gives about what piety is that piety is imitating the gods. Okay, and it's right there on page 46. And Euthyphro writes, "I say then, Socrates," in his kind of snarky arrogance, right? Euthyphro says, "I say then that the pious," this is Euthyphro speaking to Socrates, "that the pious is just what I'm doing right now." Right? And he's almost kind of shocked that Socrates doesn't know and that he's so insistent, because he says, this isn't complicated. The pious is exactly what I'm doing right now. Right? The pious is just what I am doing now. To proceed against, to be pious means to act against, to proceed against whoever does injustice regarding murders or thefts of sacred things, or is doing wrong in any other such thing, whether it happens to be a father or a mother or anyone else. All right. So piety, the first response that Euthyphro gives is that piety is imitating the gods. Now, the first thing I want to say about this, right, is nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Euthyphro's first response to what piety is imitating the gods, is exactly probably the same response to piety you and I have if we are committed to some type of theology. Right? If you're a Christian or you're a Muslim and somebody asks you what is piety, right? If you're a Christian and someone asks you what is piety, you would say, acting like Jesus. That's what you'd say. In fact, when I was finishing my PhD, I spent a whole year teaching at a small Christian college in Montecito, a small private Christian college in Montecito. And at the end of this year of me teaching at a small private Christian college, you can imagine the sitcom comedy that came out of that year. At the end of the year, I had about 30 students, and they were fabulous people. I loved them dearly, and we had a great year. And at the end of the year, they came up to me on our last lecture, and they said, "Professor Dungy, we have had a great year. We love you very much. And we want to thank you for coming and teaching us this year. And we got you a gift." And they said, "We really love you. And we've had a great year, but we're kind of worried about your soul." Is what they said, literally. Literally what they said, that was a quote, but they said, "We're really worried about your soul." because I was even more reckless then than I am now. Obviously, I'm an old man now. And they said, so we've got you a gift. We have a gift for you. And there's a little box, beautiful little box, and I opened it up. And inside the box was this beautiful leather artisan, handcrafted artisan leather bracelet. Beautiful. Artisan, handcrafted bracelet. And pounded and burned into the leather of that bracelet were the letters WWJD. And they got me this bracelet. And they said, we love you, but we're worried about your soul. And we want you to have this bracelet, and we want you to wear it. And so the next time you're out on State Street getting hammered or chasing down some cocaine or something, right? We want you to have the bracelet on and just think, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And that what would Jesus do is exactly the same as Euthyphro's first answer to what is piety. Piety is imitating the gods. If you want to know what piety is, do what the gods do. If you want to be Christian, if you want to know how to be a pious Christian, say to yourself, what would Jesus do? And what? Do it. Imitate it. Follow it. So Euthyphro's response, his first definition about what piety is, imitating the gods, is exactly the same as our definition today if you happen to be religious. If you're a Christian, piety is imitating Jesus. If you're a Muslim, piety is imitating the prophet. All right. And Euthyphro even has an answer, right? Euthyphro says, look, piety is imitating the gods. And he says to Socrates, let me give you some evidence. He says to Socrates, Euthyphro says to Socrates, piety is imitating the gods. And he says, and Euthyphro says, I will give you some evidence. Let me demonstrate. And on the top of page 47, Euthyphro says, human beings, by which he means we Athenians, right? We Athenians, this is Euthyphro speaking, top of page 47. We Athenians believe, we Athenians of the Homeric traditions, we Athenians of the Homeric traditions believe that Zeus is the best and the most just of the gods. That's what we believe. And at the same time, we agree, we also know and believe and accept and agree. And at the same time, we agree that he, Zeus, bound his own father, fought with him and put him in Tantros, I think that's the name of the place. Zeus got in a fight with Kronos because the father, Kronos, was eating the kids, doing some unjust things, eating the kids. And Zeus thought that was unjust and rose up against his father. He acted against his father. He proceeded against his father because Zeus believed his father was doing something unjust. And that's what this means. We Athenians of the Homeric traditions believe that Zeus is the best and the most just of the gods. At the same time that we also believe and know that Zeus rose up against his own father, proceeded against his own father because his father was eating the children. Literally, that's what it says, was gulping down the sons. Talk about family dysfunction. I want to see Dr. Phil do a show on family dysfunction in Greek tragedy and mythology, right? So Zeus was gulping down the kids without justice, right? He was eating them without justice. And that the latter, in turn, rose up, and so Zeus became the god of the gods and became the most just god because Zeus rose up against his father's injustice. He proceeded against his father's injustice. And so Euthyphro says to Socrates, look, piety is imitating the gods. I believe my father has done something unjust, and I've got this moral responsibility. I got this pious responsibility to proceed against him. even if he is my own father. And by the way, I've got some proof or some evidence that this is correct, because in our traditions, in our holy book, right, it says, or the story is told, that Zeus, the god who we believe to be the most just, became the most just precisely because he acted against his father when he believed his father was doing something unjust. And Euthyphro says, so piety is imitating the gods, and I'm following the traditions. I'm imitating Zeus. I'm simply doing what Zeus did. Okay, there it is. All right. And Socrates listens to this, and right towards the bottom of page 47, Socrates says, Euthyphro, do you truly hold that these things have happened in this way? Right? And Euthyphro says, oh yes, even more wondrous things. Okay. And then Socrates says something that will lead us, that is foreshadowing the second definition. Okay? Socrates says, and do you hold that there really is war among the gods against one another, and terrible enmities and battles and many other such things? And Euthyphro says, oh yes, not only these, Socrates, but as I said, I will also explain many other things. Okay, now I want to pause right here, because we're going to talk about that point in a few seconds. Okay? All right? Socrates is gesturing to something that's going to come. And I want to pause right here, because we need to deal with still this first response. Now, clearly, Socrates is not satisfied. Clearly, Socrates is not satisfied with Euthyphro's answer that piety is imitating the gods. Okay? That piety is imitating the gods. Now, he's not satisfied for two reasons. One that he says, and then one that we will imply. Okay? Socrates is not satisfied with Euthyphro's answer that piety is imitating the gods for two reasons. One that he says, and one that we will imply. Now, the first reason that Socrates is unsatisfied, the first reason that Socrates is not satisfied with Euthyphro's response that piety is imitating the gods, because technically speaking, this assertion, piety is imitating the gods, it's a description of an action, and it's not a definition. Okay? It's a description of an action, but it's not a definition. And not only is it not a definition, it doesn't tell us anything about the value, the good or the bad, of what is being imitated. Okay? So Socrates says, right? So Euthyphro is about to go on this rant about the many wonderful things he knows. And Socrates stops him. He stops him. He says, wait a minute. Hold on. Before you go off on this rant, right in the middle of 48, Socrates says to Euthyphro, don't you remember that I didn't ask you to teach me some one or two of the many pious things, but that idea, that eidos itself, by which all the pious things are pious? For surely you are saying that it is by one idea that the impious things are impious and the pious things pious. Right? So right away, Socrates is dissatisfied with Euthyphro's response that piety is imitating the gods, because it doesn't tell us anything about what is being imitated. Right? To say that piety is imitating the gods doesn't tell us anything about the value of what is being. First of all, not only does it not tell us what is being imitated, right? right? It could be cannibalism. Maybe the gods believe in cannibalism. Piety is cannibalism. Okay? And so on Euthyphro's kind of understanding, being a cannibal, imitating cannibalism is piety, right? So the problem from Socrates' point of view, the problem with Euthyphro's first response, piety is imitating the gods, it doesn't tell us anything about what is being imitated, right? It doesn't tell us there's no definition, there's no description, there's no account of the thoughts and the actions that are actually being what? Imitated, right? The response, piety is imitating the gods, says nothing. It tells us nothing about what is actually being imitated, right? And not only does it not tell us anything about what is being imitated, it doesn't tell us in the big scheme of things about whether what we are imitating is truly good or bad. Right? So we have no definition, we have no account, no description, no definition of what it is we're imitating. Right? It could be anything. Piety is imitating the gods. Okay, what the fuck did they do? They did X. So we don't know anything about what it is that is being imitated. So there's no definition, there's no descriptive definition. And not only do we not know what is being imitated, whether it's X or Y or Z, but even more importantly, from the metaphysical point of view, we don't know anything about whether or not X, Y, and Z are objectively what? Good. Okay? So on the first level, Socrates is disappointed in the response that piety is imitating the gods, because we don't know anything about what is being imitated. And if we don't know anything about what is being imitated, then how the hell are we supposed to begin a philosophical discussion about whether what we're doing, what we're imitating, is actually what? Objectively what? Good. Or whether what we're imitating is going to actually make the situation fucking worse. So that's the first reason Socrates rejects it. Now, the second reason is equally as important, if not more profound, from an abstract philosophical point of view. To say, and this is the second deeper reason why Socrates rejects it, this is the implied reason, is if you think about it, impiety, whatever piety is or whatever justice is, it's imitating the gods. So imitation, right? If you think about what imitation is, what is imitation? Imitation is simply doing what you're told. Imitation is following. Imitation is doing what you're told. Now, to imitate or to follow or to do what you're told, does that require any thinking? No. In fact, it's the opposite of thinking. It's the absence of thinking, right? And if it's the absence of thinking, it's the absence of philosophy. It's the absence of reasoning. It's the absence of questioning. So the first definition, piety is imitating the gods, is not just bad because it doesn't tell us anything about what we're imitating, and it doesn't tell us anything about whether or not what we're imitating is actually good or bad. But it's even worse in the deeper sense, because if you go through your whole damn life imitating what you've been told, or following what you've been told, or doing what you've been told, if you spend your whole life imitating, then you are never free. You don't think critically. How the hell can you know if anything is good or bad if all you do is imitate? And worse, just assume the imitating is good. So imitating is the absence of philosophy. Imitating is the absence of thinking. Imitating is the absence of critical investigation. Imitating the gods is exactly what philosophy is not, and exactly what philosophy calls us to transcend. All right? Okay. So Socrates punches on him a little bit because, you know, when you get into a discussion with Socrates, you got to be prepared to be rolled a little bit. So Socrates pushes on him, and then the second definition comes. The second definition comes on the next page, on page 48. And it's on line 7a. And Socrates is pushing on him, and finally Euthyphro gives the second definition. Euthyphro says, oh, God, Socrates, you're killing me. You're irritating the hell out of me. All right, okay, all right. Euthyphro says, okay, Socrates, then this is what the pious is. This is the second definition, line 7a, page 48. Then the pious, Euthyphro says, the pious is what is dear to the gods. What is dear to the gods is pious, and what is not dear to the gods, impious. Okay, so the pious is what some gods love, and the impious is what some gods don't love. Then the pious then what is dear to the gods, what the gods like is pious, and what is not dear to them, what they don't like, is impious. Okay, all right. And Socrates says, all right, that's better. That's certainly better than imitating, right? Because at least we have the beginning of a definition. Whatever the pious is, it's going to be something the gods like. And whatever the impious is, it's going to be something the gods don't like. So we're getting a little better. But Socrates says, okay, right? But isn't it true, as we already said on the page before, and isn't it true in our own traditions? And again, think of the Antigone now. Go back to the Antigone, right? Isn't it true in our tradition? Socrates, top of page 49, Socrates says, but wasn't it also said that the gods quarrel, Euthyphro, and differ with each other, and that there is conflict among the gods about these things? Right? And Socrates is saying, look, isn't it okay? The pious is, whatever the pious is, it's what the gods love, and whatever the impious is, it's what the gods don't like. But we don't know, right? We know that in our own tradition, that the gods themselves argue about what the pious is. We know in our own tradition that the gods themselves, Hera and Zeus, right? And Poseidon, whoever the gods are, that the gods themselves argue about what things are pious. In fact, that's in our tradition. In fact, in the Antigone and Creon had fundamentally different ideas about what the gods think is pious. Antigone believed quite sincerely and quite authentically that the gods, that her expectations of piety were to do what? Bury the brother. Right?
Professor?
Yep.
Is this second definition of piety very much of a tribal conception of justice?
Oh, it absolutely is. All of these are tribal conceptions of justice. Piety is what the gods like. Do it. But the problem is that even in these traditions, as we saw in the Antigone already, we saw this in the Antigone, and now we're seeing a real world example of it here. Right? In the Antigone and Creon have fundamentally different interpretations of what the gods think are what? Pious. Antigone thinks that the pious thing for her to do is bury her brother. In fact, she's right, and in a way she's right. From her position as a sister, position as member of a royal family, as a woman, it's her job, both in the family and in the kind of moral and religious and cosmic sense, to give burial rights to the brothers. Period. And she says, this is what Zeus would want me to do. And Creon looks at her and says, are you out of your mind? Literally, that's what he says. Okay, I paraphrased a little bit. He says, are you out of your mind? Zeus doesn't want you to bury the brother. And this is a quote. This I will quote. Creon says to Antigone, when have you ever seen Zeus celebrating a traitor? Your brother's a traitor. When have you ever seen Zeus thinking that the traitor could ever be pious? In fact, Creon says it's my piety requires that I leave him to rot because he's a traitor. He attacked the family. He attacked the city. So in the traditions, the gods, in the Homeric traditions, the gods themselves, it's part of the traditions that the gods themselves dispute about what is pious. They argue about it. And people themselves have legitimate disputes about what the gods expect of them in terms of their own piety. And later on, Socrates, towards the bottom of the page, Socrates says, the just and the unjust, the noble and the shameful, the good and the bad, isn't it because we differ? Isn't it because the gods differ on these things? And isn't it because the gods differ that we differ about these things and can't come to a sufficient decision about them, that we become enemies to each other? And Euthyphros says, I think you're right about that. And Socrates says at the bottom of the page 49, Socrates, then among the gods too, well-born Euthyphro, some believe some things just, others believe others, according to your argument, and noble and shameful, and good and bad. For surely they wouldn't quarrel with each other unless they differed about these things. Okay, so in the traditions, the gods themselves argue about what the hell the pious is. And because the gods argue, human beings have different interpretations of what is expected of them, as we saw in the Antigone and the Creon. And in a way, as we're even seen in Euthyphro, right? Euthyphro believes he's an expert on piety. He believes that his father has done something wrong, and he's imitating the gods, and he's bringing actions against his father because he thinks that's what Zeus would want. But already in some of the playful banter early on in the dialogue, we already know that the people in Euthyphro's family think he's what? It's crazy. So obviously other people in Euthyphro's family have a fundamentally different idea about what the pious thing to do in this situation is. Right? Okay, so there's a crisis. And right on the middle of page 50, Socrates says, therefore, Euthyphro, consequently, Euthyphro, in doing what you are now doing, in proceeding the way that you're about to proceed, Socrates says to him, in doing what you are now doing, punishing your father, it is nothing wondrous if you are doing something dear to Zeus, that Zeus will like, but hateful to Kronos and Ouranos, and dear to Hephaestus, but hateful to Hera, right? Aren't you worried that in doing this, okay, you might be pleasing Zeus, but chances are pretty good this is going to be insulting or offensive to Hera or Poseidon or Ouranos. This is a problem. Aren't you worried that in doing something you think is pious, you might actually be doing something that is impious at the same time? Okay. Third definition, because we've got to wrap it up. Finally, pushed and pushed and pushed. Euthyphro says, page 52, right in the middle of the page. Well, Euthyphro says, I say that the pious is whatever all the gods love, And the opposite, whatever all the gods hate, is impious. Okay, we're going to stop here. I will say a few more words about this on Tuesday, and then we start the apology. Okay? All right. Good job, you guys. Have a great
Thank you,
weekend.
Professor.
We're gonna finish